All right, we're now going to be reading about the Puritans and the Pilgrims, which are related groups. They are foundational religious groups, meaning that they are some of the earliest religious groups to come across, and they formed a large population in the 13 colonies, and that was a huge influence on how people thought at the time, especially in regards to religion. So they arrived in the 1620s, by the way. Puritans were members of a religious reform movement, meaning they want to change things, known as Puritanism. And Puritanism arose within the Church of England, also known as the Anglican Church, in the late 16th century. So that would be the late 1500s. They believed the Church of England was far too similar to the Roman Catholic Church and should eliminate ceremonies and practices not specifically found in the Bible. Get rid of all that extra stuff. Reality is the Catholic Church used to be in England, and it was the only church that was in England. But King Henry VIII of England said, I want to have a boy. I want my wife to have a boy. His wife didn't have a boy. So he had her killed. Got another wife. Says, I want to have a boy. Wife didn't have a boy. Wife didn't even have any kids. So, well, she had a daughter. So he had her killed, and he goes through this long process of marrying and getting rid of wives. Well, you can't just keep killing your wives through various means or putting them in prison for the rest of their lives. So eventually he comes to goes, I want to divorce my wife, which was not possible back then. You could not get a divorce for any reason, especially one as frivolous as my wife isn't having the kind of kid I want. So he goes to the Pope, the leader of the Catholic Church, and says, Pope, I'm the King of England, and I don't want to be married to this woman anymore because she won't give me a son. The Pope says, no, you married her. You're married. Too bad. So King Henry VIII says, well, I wanna. You know what? I'm not Catholic anymore. I don't have to listen to the Pope anymore. You know what? I'm going to start my own church. It's going to be exactly like the Catholic Church, but I'll be the Pope. The King of England will be in charge. So the early Anglican Church, the early Church of England, was exactly like the Catholics, but the king was in charge. And the only thing he really wanted to do was get a divorce. So there's a lot of people who are like, that's not enough. We broke away from the Catholic Church. We want to be just what's in the Bible, not all this extra stuff. So Puritans felt that they had a direct covenant, a direct agreement with God to enact these reforms. Like that God made an agreement with them. You will be blessed if you fix the church. Under siege from church and crown, obviously the Church of England, the Anglican Church, doesn't like this, and the King of England doesn't like this, so they're being attacked and persecuted. Certain groups of Puritans migrated, left to go to northern English colonies in the New World in the 1620s and the 1630s, laying the foundation for religious, intellectual, and social order in New England, because they were one of the largest early groups to go over there. Parts of Puritanism have reverberated throughout American life ever since. Did you know, in keeping with their focus on the home, Puritan migration to the New World usually consisted of entire families, rather than the young single men who comprised many other early European settlements. So unlike, say, the people from Jamestown, they weren't having to pay for women to come over. Entire Puritan families were going as one unit. Well into the 16th century, many priests were barely literate. They couldn't really read. Literate means can you read? And often very poor. Employment by more than one parish, more than one piece of land with people in it that a priest would go preach to, was common. So they moved often, preventing them from forming deep roots in their communities. Priests were often immune to certain penalties from the law, further feeding anti-clerical hostility. Priest does something wrong, it's illegal to punish him, people don't like that. That's what that basically means. and it contributed to their isolation from the spiritual needs of the people. So people thought the church is corrupt. We need to be able to punish people who are doing bad things. We need to be just purely what the Bible says. We're Puritans. We want it to be pure. We want to be purely about the Bible. So the Pilgrims, which was very closely related to the Puritan movement, were very similar. Both were English Protestants. They both believed the Church of England, the Anglican Church, was in need of reform. Here's the big thing. The Pilgrims, they wanted to separate from the Anglican Church and be their own church altogether. But Puritans didn't want to leave the church. They wanted to change it. Now, Puritans, about 100 of them came over, and they traveled on the Mayflower. That's the traditional bit with Thanksgiving. We'll learn about that really soon. The Puritans were a much larger group, but their beliefs were very, very similar. So I hope that helped, and I hope that you're going to do well.